And there we go. All right. Matt, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. How are you doing this afternoon?
Good. How are you doing, Brendan?
Not too bad. So we're going to talk about something that, is kind of an interesting thing to me about what Enviro-Stewards has evolved with since I started working with the firm. And that is your first software product, which, is aptly named Stewwi. But before we get into that, I kind of want to go through a bit of the personal journey to begin with, and we'll get to the fun stuff in a little while. So tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background and what led you into this journey about sustainability and decarbonization. How'd you get here?
Great question. I grew up in the greenhouse industry. My parents and even my grandparents were farmers, and margins were tight, so they were very focused on always being efficient in what they did, to the point where they took pride in putting in extra work to insulate the greenhouse before the winter season started and really being energy efficient that way. So from a young age, I saw my parents setting an example that way, and I kind of embodied that as I got older myself. And a real pivotal moment where I really wanted to focus my education and career on sustainability was when I was in grade 11 and making this decision about where I wanted to go to university.
Okay.
And it was somewhat serendipitous that there was a mission trip organized to Louisiana right following Hurricane Katrina, and seeing the impact of Ward 9 with X's written on houses where the number of deceased were shown, the water lines, how high the water had raised, and some pivotal movies around that time, like Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth, and maybe more Hollywood in An Inconvenient Truth, really had me focus around that time on sustainability, and I wanted to get into that kind of line of work in engineering, where the things I was working on in engineering would focus on sustainability and solving the climate crisis.
And was that what kind of drew you to Enviro-Stewards? Was it that kind of engineering meets sustainability angle that they had? Is that kind of what attracted you to the company to begin with?
Yeah, it was a bit of a winding path. In university, I studied energy engineering, and I went in with the mindset of, I'm going to design renewable energy and all these technological fixes. And in a roundabout way, when I came back to Enviro-Stewards, and what my program actually focused on was more things like fluids and heat transfer, which is more of the core of what Enviro-Stewards does as well. So it ended up working out quite well that I had this misperception of what my program was, but it was actually very much focused on saving energy for companies and this kind of work that Enviro-Stewards does.
And one thing that I think I've heard about you, because we haven't got the chance to go face to face much other than something like this, but of hearing something about the balance between profitability and credibility. And what does that mean to you when it comes to the overall kind of decarbonization journey that a company can go through?
Right. So when companies set an ambition to reduce their carbon emissions, a lot of times the perception that people have is that it needs to focus on those technological fixes like installing solar panels or installing heat pumps. And all those new technologies achieve the goal. They help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but they're also very costly. And the approach that we take is actually profitable in the sense that you can reduce your emissions while reducing costs at the same time. And that's by looking at things that maybe a piece of equipment is broken and there's hot water leaking out, or controls aren't dialed in well. And those are all things that don't require the kind of high upfront capital costs, but they have often an even bigger impact on reducing emissions while also reducing operating costs. And that's how we can really find a path for companies to reduce costs, increase their profitability, and not invest as much on capital expenses. That helps them achieve their goal and be profitable.
So effectively, Enviro-Stewards just figured out how to three-side the Venn diagram and you don't have to pick between the two anymore. It sounds like you guys have actually found the solution all around. That's very cool.
So the conservation is a great starting point, and you can't conserve your way out of your emissions altogether. And so there is room for those technological fixes, but it's only after you've done the low-hanging fruit to reduce your operating expenses. So once you've actually reduced emissions through the low-hanging fruit, then we'll help develop a strategy for how to use those technologies effectively to get you the rest of the way. It's important to do it in that order: conservation first, and then the technological fixes to get you the rest of the way.
And do you find it's that conservation first model that often gets clients interested in the next phase? It's kind of like, okay, I see what that quick win looks like, and therefore they can start to see how profitability can be maintained while optimizations are made, or while optimizations are made?
Yeah, companies really get excited about that first step, the conservation, because you can see the direct impact to operating expenses. And then it really becomes a value judgment for companies whether they want to invest money in those larger capital expenses to reduce emissions further. So we'll advise kind of how you can get to reducing your emissions, but it's up to each company. And we work with a really wide range of companies, whether they want to invest the money on the technological fixes to get the rest of the way.
So is that like that kind of idea of helping to find opportunities or to build in profitability and conservation at the same time, was that really kind of that original spark of creativity that gave birth to the concept of Stewwi? Where did your ambitions for your own EMIS come from?
The approach of conservation first has been integral to Enviro-Stewards' approach since the very beginning when Bruce founded the company. But the sparks that got Stewwi started was to help automate those things so that we're not just showing clients a 1 week snapshot, but that we can help them along the journey as they're trying to decarbonize over multiple years. And so having Internet of Things sensors installed that show data in real time lets you see how much progress you've made on specific opportunities to reducing your emissions, where there might be room for more improvement, to help make the business case where installing equipment might be cost effective still, and making kind of a plan for 5-10 years from now, what you would need to do if you wanted to get all the way to net zero.
So obviously EMIS technology has been around for a while, but are there certain gaps or limitations from the traditional EMIS systems that you're hoping Stewwi will kind of like find its own fit? What is it designed to address differently?
Yeah, it's really focused on action and where you can have a meaningful impact on reducing emissions. So traditional EMIS systems try to install sensors on way too much equipment, and that's both costly in terms of the equipment that you need to buy. It's a lot of time invested in maintaining all those sensors, and in the end it's not really effective because clients need to spend so much time sifting through a huge amount of data to actually find the valuable data that helps them make decisions. And where Stewwi really shines is that we implement opportunities into Stewwi that we found by walking through the facility and measuring the processes. We put those opportunities in Stewwi, and then we can track the progress of those opportunities with sensors and see how companies are making progress. So with air compressors as an example, the actual data might show that on a weekend or at nights when you wouldn't be expecting production to be running, there's still compressed air being used. And that might be a trigger to intervene and say, let's do a compressed air leak audit to have the system working more optimally. And you can actually show the results of having done that compressed air leak audit and fixing the leaks. But then over time, as the system goes through wear and tear, leaks will naturally develop again, and Stewwi can give an alert that you need to intervene again and do another compressed air leak audit at a regular interval. And so having sensors specifically connected to the opportunities where there is both a large amount of consumption that contributes greatly to a company's emission baseline, and where there's an opportunity to intervene, that's kind of the sweet spot where we would want to install sensors. And Stewwi is set up in a way that you can track the results of those opportunities based on the real-time monitoring of sensors.
So I know in a lot of industries, and it doesn't sound like manufacturing is different, but a lot of them are proceeding from a very reactive kind of point of view into a much more proactive. And it sounds like that's kind of like one of the things that an EMIS can actually do is help you make that transition. How has Stewwi evolved since its creation, and what do you think makes it different from other energy tracking tools that kind of preceded it?
Traditional energy management information systems would just show the data and leave it up to the operations and maintenance teams to interpret the data. And where Stewwi really excels, and where we've also kind of shifted our focus with Enviro-Stewards, is that we can show the long-term path to decarbonization. And so a company might have a target to achieve net zero by 2050, 80% by 2040, and 50% by 2030 as an example. And you can start to plug those numbers, those targets into Stewwi, and start to forecast where you actually want to have impact through conservation opportunities. So when we have a list of potential opportunities that we found by going through the plant, we'll quantify how much each opportunity might be able to contribute to reducing the emissions of a facility. And then once you start assigning dates, implementation dates to each of those opportunities, you can start to forecast where your emissions might go and see if that matches the path that you've set out through your targets. And right now, a lot of times, ambitious targets are being set, but clients don't really have any credible way to know how to get to those targets. And that's where forecasting based on assigning dates to these opportunities can really help clients be proactive instead of just reactive to regulations that might change, or consumer pressure, or pressure from investors, things like that.
I guess it also, like every one of us deals with deadlines on a daily basis. I guess it's almost that kind of accountability aspect, right? Like there's a date to it, we all have to move towards it. Now that makes a lot of sense. But let's say for myself, let's say I'm a manufacturer and I don't know where to start in all this. Just use your imagination for a second. How does, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, and I found it really insightful. You talked earlier about how clients sometimes have like a mass amount of data and aren't really sure about what the heck to do with it. And how do you see Stewwi helping them move from that data overwhelm to insight to finally putting something into action?
Yeah, great question. And we try to find that balance with every client, because it lands differently at each facility that we work with. Determining where to install permanent sensors and track things in real time over a long period of time can be valuable for some processes where you can have a meaningful impact. For some, it might just be a week-long snapshot, and that gives a good enough indication. And so the strategic placement of sensors and connecting them to the places where you can have impact is one part where we would add a lot of value for clients, that you don't over-design your energy management information system, but really have it be that it fits the needs of what the specific client is looking for. And in some cases, that driver might be sustainability, or it might be financial. It might look different for a multinational manufacturing company versus just a small manufacturer. So that right sizing is really important to make sure that it's effective for the client that we work with. And then beyond that, the data is one thing, but often clients will still be busy just with the day-to-day operations. The maintenance team will be focused on keeping the plant running. And so helping to interpret the data at a regular interval can be a really valuable way for us to contribute. Some clients might have an energy manager or a sustainability coordinator that can interpret that data. We're happy to support them if a client already has one in place. Or by setting up quarterly meetings, we can support the client and help them interpret the data. and potentially quarterback the implementation of opportunities, that we project manage or do engineering design or get vendor quotes to make sure that the opportunities actually get realized while the plant staff stay focused on their production.
Right. And can you, talking about, people being in the plants and everything like that and making sure that production is still going, is there like an example that you are able to share about how Stewwi has actually helped a facility kind of reduce either greenhouse gas emissions or their energy use? Is there anybody in particular you can talk about?
So a great example is a manufacturer in Toronto. In addition to monitoring processes and tracking the progress of opportunities at an equipment level, we can also install sensors on the utility mains, so on water, electricity, and natural gas. And for one client in Toronto, we discovered that they had a 60 liter per minute baseline on weekends when no one was around and you wouldn't really be expecting any water to be used. And so the data showed that in real time. The engineers could go to the site on a long weekend, and as they were walking around the facility, they would search for places where water was still running and ask tough questions like, does this really need to be running still? And it turned out that one of the contributors was a significant, it was a failed sensor that would have water continue to flow into a tank and overflow. And so that was a simple one where they could at least prove the effect by closing the hand valve, and immediately you saw the water level on the main drop. There was another hot water tank where water was being added and the sensor wasn't dialed in properly. And by closing that one, you could see the water drop down further. And in that case, it wasn't just the water consumption, but because that cold water was actually being heated up, it was actually contributing to natural gas consumption as well that was excessive. So as they closed that hand valve, more savings were being realized. There was a leak in the wastewater room that had water going to the drain continuously, and it's kind of hidden, so plant staff wouldn't necessarily be triggered to ask questions about it, but because our team was actively looking for it, you find these opportunities. And so demonstrating each of these by just manually intervening in the moment showed that we could actually get that baseline down to zero, and then the process starts to start implementing more long-term solutions to fix that sensor, to repair the leak, things like that. And so they were able to save a significant amount of money by not wasting all that water and energy 24/7, and also reducing emissions at the same time. So that one had a huge impact.
And what are we talking about? Like, are we talking about like 2% increase, like in savings? What are we talking about when we're talking about shutting off hand valves of water and finding unidentified leaks and, hot water tank that's running when people don't need hot water? What are we talking about real world?
Yeah, it's incredible. Sometimes it looks like the impact of a leak might be small. You might have the analogy in your house of a running toilet or a leaking toilet. And when you actually extrapolate that over a full year, that adds up to a huge amount of water, a huge amount of emission savings and financial savings. So often for water, we'll find opportunities at facilities in the range of 15 to 25% of water consumption. We can find savings for natural gas in kind of that same order of magnitude, 10 to 30% of savings, and for electricity, maybe more in the range of 10 to 15%, really depending on the type of manufacturing industry and the scale of their operations. And that has a huge impact because you're still producing the same amount of product, but by reducing those costs, you're not just you're actually having all that savings go directly to profit.
That's, double digits across the board effectively. And I can't imagine anybody would be saying no to that. Now, before we move on though, I want to point out something that I find personally very unique about Stewwi and the Enviro-Stewards kind of like method for an EMIS. As more and more, AI systems have come online and technology seems to continue to be woven deeper and deeper into our day-to-day lives at work and at home. One of the terms that I've heard come up time and time again recently is something called human in the loop. So putting people back in a very important junction point for software. So I remember 10, 15 years ago, we were talking about software and hardware in the loop, and now it's us. How do you feel about the fact that, because I thought the coolest thing about Stewwi was not only that you're providing the benefits of this ongoing tracking, but that a lot of the data and a lot of the opportunities that are being presented are based off of your team's expertise. And that's not just some computer just running, data crunching, but it's building upon your experience as professionals. How do you feel about that unique addition within Stewwi?
Yeah, the addition of AI can be incredibly powerful to help crunch data and to maybe support in benchmarking among lots of facilities within the same industry, or to compare facilities of similar sizes with each other, and maybe starting to recognize trends in the large amount of minute-by-minute data that we would be collecting. So the advancements in algorithms, machine learning could really be a valuable asset to Stewwi and give the technical team just one more tool in the tool belt to identify opportunities. And it really does require human interface as well to make sense of what the data actually represents, because every facility is so unique. There is a lot of nuance to the behavioral changes maybe that might be required to get operators or maintenance teams on board to make changes. There's a lot of human intervention needed to make sure projects continue to move along and to make sure that the actual intent of a sustainability project is still maintained, because missing one valve or mis-setting the controls of a loop that might make sense from the perspective of cost savings could have a huge impact on losing all the sustainability savings. And so it's really important to always have someone on our technical team review that the data is actually representing what you're intending it to, and that the savings that are being realized are real, so that companies aren't accused of any greenwashing,
right.
that we can actually verify the results that this great tool is giving us answers to.
Very cool. So let's jump ahead a little bit into kind of like the future of decarbonization and the fit of an EMIS in that. How do you see companies who are evaluating whether it's scope 1 or 2, which I know is kind of more your exclusive kind of wheelhouse, potentially even scope 3, but how do you see tools like Stewwi helping maybe relieve some of the pressures that manufacturers are feeling as they're being asked to make all these massive changes in investment, with sustainability being now one of those? How do you see an EMIS like Stewwi fitting into that conversation?
Yeah, that's great. There's maybe 2 parts to this. One is the collection of data. A lot of times companies will have requirements either from their shareholders or from a retailer to provide data, and that requirement is going to become greater and greater. And traditionally, a maintenance manager might have gone around the facility and manually written down the meter readings every day, and that's a huge waste of their time. So by automating these processes to bring the data directly from the meter into the platform, to have it crunch the numbers, to spit out a monthly reporting value rather than having to manually copy and paste numbers in an Excel sheet, saves the staff's team a huge amount of time.
Sure.
That in itself will take a huge load off of the plant staff. And in addition, when you set these priorities for sustainability, it can be really tough to prioritize where you need to intervene first. And so the effort might just kind of fall back on what the plant staff have been most comfortable with, which is reacting to maintenance issues that come up or making sure that production is increased slightly. And by having a tool like Stewwi help project manage the opportunities, prioritize the opportunities where you can have the biggest impact for the dollar invested, that kind of prioritization is really valuable to make sure that the time that plant staff need to be involved to implement projects is actually put to the places where management actually wants to see changes happen the most.
And you mentioned something about how every dollar is invested, so you read my mind a little bit. How do you see a data-driven platform like Stewwi building that credibility for not only potential customers, government regulators, potentially even investors, depending on the sector? How do you see that continual data flow helping in that world?
Yeah, traditionally, investors might have wanted to see a return on financial investment in terms of financial return on financial investment. And more investors want to see a social impact for the dollar invested. And so giving data, making data available to calculate an impact ROI, for example, can be a really valuable metric to help investors make those decisions, whether it's investing in a company or lending for a specific project. It can make it visible for staff to know that they're working at a company that they feel passionate about, or consumers that want to buy a product, and that emission impact per product is put on a label so that consumers can make informed decisions. And for regulators, it's being able to hold companies accountable that when they make environmental claims, that they're held to the claims that they make, and the data really makes that possible to track that you can prove the savings that you said that you were going to have, both for your marketing purposes, or maybe if you're getting government funding, that the government funding was used in a way that actually realized savings. And the data just makes that crystal clear, and companies don't have to worry about being accused of greenwashing under new legislation. They just have very confident data that they can fall back on.
Great. And this one, I don't know if you'll be able to answer, so I'm going to, tongue-in-cheek this one a little bit.
Sure.
In the future roadmap, how do you see Stewwi evolving in the next couple of years? Like, do you see things that are on the horizon that you're kind of saying, well, 2 years down the road, this is where we should be kind of idea? Is there anything from that angle that you can share?
It's exciting to think about how Stewwi can continue to evolve over the coming years to best support the needs of clients. A couple areas that we're focusing on is to develop algorithms that can better interpret data so that it can be automated, how sensors interpret the data and demonstrate the savings based on time of day that equipment might be running when you wouldn't expect it to, or that there might be some nuance in how much energy might be used by certain equipment. So algorithms can be really powerful to help automate some of the ideas that our engineers and consultants bring in terms of the 25 years of experience that Enviro-Stewards has had. And to make the lives of the plant staff easier. So data visualization is an area that we're interested in continuing to grow, that clients can better see the different categories that energy consumption might be going to, or better visualizing where sensors are placed around the facility and getting notifications when maintenance may be needed on equipment. So all these things can really help make the lives easier of those people that are actually using the data.
And just some final thoughts for you today on that. If you were talking to a mid-sized manufacturer that was saying, how do I get started with this whole decarbonization journey? What advice would you give them?
Great question. And we have worked already through Stewwi with both large and mid-sized manufacturers. And really the key is to at least have some plan to first set some targets of where you'd like to get to and understand where you're starting from. And just through kind of a free assessment, we can help interpret where your baseline is right now, using utility bills to really understand what your current consumption is. And that can help inform the level of sensors that would be practical to install. So for a mid-sized company, that might look different from a large multinational manufacturer. And so right-sizing it, that you can use it for the things that you want to use it for, whether that's reporting or finding credible opportunities for reduction. We can find the right places to install those sensors. So often that analysis based on utility bills and a walkthrough of the facility are a great starting point. And we're always excited to explore a new facility and help talk through those first steps. So we're open to a conversation around that anytime.
And if somebody was ready to explore whether Stewwi was a good fit for their operation, what is the best way to have that initial conversation?
Yeah, there's an email address that you can reach out to, Stewwi@Enviro-Stewards.com, or going to the website, Enviro-Stewards.com, and you can see the different ways that we support clients, and you can see if the need that you have can be met by the work that we do.